Welcome and good morning. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm excited about this morning. I say humbly, but confidently, this is going to be an amazing show. A few guests on the program. Yes, two. First, Chris McPherson. She is the event director for an organization called Swim Across America. She's out of the Nashville chapter, which is obviously not local, but it's such a unique organization, and it's throughout the country that I think there's an opportunity for our community to get one of these events to raise money for cancer. So I think that's going to be a very exciting interview. But after that, Elmira native, astronaut, Eileen Collins is going to join us. Stay tuned for that. That's going to be a very interesting interview because as we talked about just the other day, NASA announcing that we're going back to the moon. So we'll pick her brain on what that means. Before we get to our interview with Chris McPherson, I wanted to mention just a quick news story because it ties in with a great text message that I got. That news story is housing is now topping bail as the issue that's stalling the New York State budget. That's a signal for trouble. I think I mentioned that I wasn't overly confident on what would happen with bail reform, and I think this just proves that. Excuse me. I'm surprised that would be the sticking point. But according to the New York Post, that's what we're looking at. And the reason I mention it is because we got this great email, or text, I should say. 3 words to fix our upstate problems. West New York. Thank you for writing in. As always, you can contact me. Not a bad idea. I know it's been said numerous times that we should split off. I don't know how or if it can be done. I know there's been a lot of groups and organizations that have proposed many different ideas. I think we're open to any idea that comes out. So if you are a part of one of those organizations or you know someone, I would love to have an interview because I know this is a running theme for us in upstate New York that are sick of and tired of the Albany decisions based with the mindset of New York City. So thank you for those text messages. So you can always contact me at that number. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, Chris McPherson, the event director for Swim Across America Nashville, will join us. Also, as I mentioned a little bit later on, and this is one you're not going to want to miss, we're going to be talking with Eileen Collins, and that's her book, Through the Glass Ceiling to the Stars. So we look forward to that. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services sector of our interview. Thank you so much for being on the show, Chris.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Frank. I appreciate it.
Well, I want to find out all about Swim Across America. Now, you're specifically in Nashville, but tell us about the goal of Swim Across America.
Well, Swim Across America was started about 35 years ago, and its main mission really is to fight cancer, but basically by funding very innovative, promising research. So things that aren't funded nationally that help provide seed money to get them in a place where they can really make a difference.
So what's
and very successful with it too.
So. Okay, so tell us what like a typical event is. How do you raise funds for such an important cause?
Well, this is why it's so cool.
Yeah.
I think to me, being a swimmer my whole life,
yeah.
Mainly there were swimathons before and things
Sure.
like that. When they started this, it's not really about the swimming. It's more about building teams and fundraising, but having the celebration be part of the swim at the end. And it actually happens in about 23 cities around the country where there's a direct relationship with a medical institution where the money goes directly to a specific lab. And it's a partnership. They work together to raise the money. There are a bunch of other smaller swims as well that will help go to a national fund. But we raise money and we make it kind of a fun, friendly competition. And we do some fun events with it, and then it culminates in the day of the event where we get together and we do a pool swim. There are a lot of open water swims around the country, but we have fun team relays where we pull out inflatable balls and little duckies on our heads. So it's a lot of fun, but it's also a very impactful day where we talk about it and present the check to Vanderbilt. People can tell their stories, things like that.
So which team in Nashville got to stack the deck by having Missy Franklin on their team?
Oh, well, Missy didn't join the team.
Oh, okay.
She's in one of our 15 teams, but she will be there.
Oh,
and
okay.
She's been very much a part of it with our kickoff event.
That's great.
And, she'll be there on deck signing caps and taking pictures, and she's wonderful.
Well, it sounds like doing some research, not just in Nashville, but throughout the country, this has become a community, like a family. Is that right?
Totally.
Yeah.
In fact, I just got back from the summit in Tampa a month ago, and for all the leaders in the country of the events to get help in building all of this. And oh my gosh, it was just wonderful. And everyone with every city, you build your team within the city too.
Right.
So we're interconnected nationally, but also within your group, you really, this is all Nashville too, and it starts to expand where everyone gets connected within the city for one cause.
I was surprised to learn that it's been 36 years, as they say, making waves to fight cancer.
Yes.
Yeah. And they've accomplished a lot.
Oh, a lot. In fact, there are 4 drugs that have been, very successful.
Yeah.
Very much immunotherapy is kind of the new thing that's really taking off. And one example actually is my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
She actually goes to Vanderbilt for treatment, but she a couple years ago had stage 4 colon cancer. She's 76 years old, or was at that time.
Yeah.
And it was not looking good for her.
No.
Big tumor, a lot of metastases, and so it was a very scary thing for us. And she actually was able to take Keytruda, which is one of the 4 successful drugs, and in 18 months, totally cancer-free.
Wow, amazing.
With very few side effects. So it's become a much more personal cause to me now. And it's if we could just keep up that good work and get rid of it for good, that'd be awesome.
What would you recommend to areas in our community that want to start one of these swims in their local community?
Well, Swim Across America, like you said, is a national event.
Yeah.
So, swimacrossamerica.org, the website. If you want to join our Nashville swim and come, that's swimacrossamerica.org/Nashville. But you can look up and find all the different swims, and if there's not one near you, yes, you can certainly contact, swimacrossamerica.org and talk to people. I mean, I'm happy to talk to anyone too.
Yeah.
I think anyone on that team is so willing to reach out. But it is, they're pretty much from, the East Coast all the way to San Francisco Bay. So we've got a bunch already, which are great.
And it's such a positive, like you said, atmosphere. It's a fun way to get involved, and it's a fun way to help your community and really fight something that sadly has affected so many of us, which is cancer.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those things that pretty much affects everyone.
Yes.
Everyone's been affected by cancer, whether it's someone very close to them or a friend, a friend's friend, but it's out there and it's horrible, and we need to get rid of this thing.
Well, before we go, I want to wish you guys all the best of luck with your event this weekend, and of course that you win. How can we help you in Nashville specifically?
Well, we would love, number one, anyone who would like to come and join us, swimacrossamerica.org/Nashville.
Yeah.
You can either, one, register, come swim with us. You can join my team so I can make more money. No, or you can just get on swimacrossamerica.org/Nashville and donate. And we would appreciate any donations. We're trying to reach at least 75,000 to donate to
That's great.
Vanderbilt Ingram Cancer Center.
And and you're getting close, it looks like.
We're getting there. So
Fingers crossed.
A lot of great people helping out, and it's going to be a great, fun event too. So.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for being on the program and spreading the word about such an important organization.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It means a lot to me.
Of course. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in downtown Corning. We talk about community so often, and I think with Chris McPherson, who we just spoke with, though that's Nashville, I think that would be a wonderful addition to all the great events that we have in our area. So that would be, just putting it out there if anybody's interested in starting a Swim Across America Corning or Elmira or Hornell. So coming up, as I mentioned, excuse me, got a frog in my throat this morning. Coming up next, we have Eileen Collins. We know her from being an astronaut, but also being from our area, born and raised in Elmira, went to Corning Community College. She has a book out called Through the Glass Ceiling to the Stars, the story of the first American woman to command a space mission. So we're going to talk to her about the book. We're going to talk to her about this recent news that we're going to the moon for the first time in a very, very long time. So she's coming up after a short break. But as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, please contact me. As I said, I've been trying to read your texts. I read them personally, but sometimes I try to mention them on the air. So there you go. That's the best way to do it. Reach out to me, email or text, and I'll try to get to them at the end of the program, or if it's after the program, on the next show. So let's go to that short break, and then when we come back, we will hear from Eileen Collins. Really looking forward to that, and I think you'll really enjoy this interview. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program. And before we start our interview, would you like me to make you feel at home and start with a countdown from 10? That was corny.
Sure, that sounds good. Countdown from 5 or 3 if you want.
Oh, okay. No, Eileen Collins is our guest. This is such a pleasure because you're such a hero around our area and across, of course, the country.
Well, yeah, I just got off an interview with NPR, and I talked about, Elmira, New York, and Corning Community College, and the area that I grew up in, how important that still is to me, and I still have friends and family in the area, and what a beautiful part of the country.
It is, and it's a beautiful day today, and we're so glad that you could be on the program, especially with the recent news that NASA announced that we're going back to the moon. Why did it take us so long to go back to the moon, do you think?
Well, it's been 50 years.
Yeah.
The last crew left the moon, astronaut crew left in 1972. So it's been over 50 years now, and when we go back, we're going back to orbit the moon in 2024, and then hopefully land on the moon in 2025. So to answer your question, the reason it took so long is cost, by far.
Okay.
If it was cheaper to do this, we would have continued going back to the moon. But the second part of that question is it's very risky. You remember we had Apollo 13 where an oxygen tank exploded on the way to the moon, and our country's leadership had to decide, are we going to keep doing this very risky mission where we could lose our astronauts? We've already landed on the moon.
Right.
We beat the Soviets. We brought our rocks back. Back then we didn't have the technology to build research stations. So we shut down the program and decided to build a space shuttle and a space station in low Earth orbit.
Do you think that's the ultimate goal with Artemis, that we're talking about building a station on the moon?
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And that is a stated goal. So NASA is planning, we're taking baby steps now, going back to the moon and proving that the life support equipment will work, the propulsion will work, all the hardware and software, we're proving that works. Once we know that we've got that certain amount of reliability, we're going to start building a research station at the south pole of the moon. And this will happen before the end of the decade for sure.
Wow.
And then we're also building a small space station called Gateway that will orbit the moon. And that Gateway will be used as a staging point for the astronauts to dock on their way from Earth and then get ready to go take their lander down to the South Pole.
Wow, this is so fascinating. I know this has been talked about in the past. Do you believe this eventually leads to us, at least the research of going to Mars?
Yes, so the ultimate goal is Mars. So Mars is about 6 months to 2 years. And of course, that depends on where the planets are located. If the planets are on the same side of the sun, it's about a 6-month trip. And if the planets are on the opposite side of the sun, it's 2 years. So that's why you have launch windows. You don't want to launch when it's a 2-year journey because that wouldn't be very efficient.
Right.
So we have launch windows that when the planets are aligned, we will go. Now, the number one reason that we're going to the moon, which is only 3 days away, is to test all this equipment that we'll be using someday on Mars. We want to make sure that it has a high reliability before we put astronauts at risk so far away on planet Mars.
And you saw who they announced will be on that journey. What did you think, in your expert opinion, of who they announced and who the crew is?
Oh, it's an excellent crew. But I will say that any one of there's currently 41 astronauts on active flying status. Any one of them could do the mission.
Okay.
But NASA wanted to pick a group that worked together very, very well, that had a cross-section of skills and a cross-section of diversity, which I think is very important, that young people can look and say, oh, there's a woman on the mission, there's a person of color on the mission. And when people see that crew, they can, young people say, well, maybe I can be an astronaut someday. And, with ultimately hoping that they study math and they study science, they do their homework, and they do well in school. Because I think these missions aren't just part of exploring space, but they're also getting the next generation to have hopes and dreams and to work hard to achieve their dreams, which will make our country stronger.
Yeah, there's someone there everybody can relate to. And so I guess and I want to talk about your background in a little bit, but when you grew up, were you dreaming of being an astronaut?
I sure was.
Yeah.
I was in 4th grade in Elmira, New York. I remember sitting in my classroom reading an article on the Gemini astronauts, and I was maybe 9 years old back then, and I was thinking, I want to be just like them. And I saw they were military pilots, they were test pilots, they were engineers, and I just thought they were the coolest guys around. And that's when I started. There weren't any women back then, but I was a kid, and I thought, well, I'm just going to be a lady astronaut. And I started working towards that goal, and here I am today. I never actually thought that it would come true, but it just goes to show you that in our country, if it doesn't matter where you come from, how much money your family has, you don't have to be an influential family. You can set your own goals and reach your dreams if you just keep working hard. Don't give up. Always have backup plans. I can tell you right now, I wrote a book. You can see all those areas where I failed and things just didn't work out my way. And I think having a backup plan and not giving up is a really good message.
I'm so glad you mentioned the book, because we were talking about it earlier. Through the Glass Ceiling to the Stars, the story of the first American woman to command a space mission. Why did you decide to write that when you did? I mean, you've had an amazing career. What influenced you to do it right then?
Well, it was the pandemic, without a doubt. Because I had authors asking me way back, 10, 15 years ago when I was still an active astronaut, let's write a book. And they after my last mission, I had 12 authors contact me to write a book, and I just said, no, I don't want to do it. I had a lot of personal issues going on. I mean, my mother died, my father died, like one right after the other after my last mission, and my life was total chaos. I wasn't going to write a book back then. Plus, I was raising my 2 kids that were 5 and 10 years old at the time. But the years went by, and I would say that, authors and publishers lost interest in my book because it had been so long. But when the pandemic hit, all my travel stopped. And the meetings I had went to Zoom, and I had all this extra time. And I thought, I called a person who was still interested, Jonathan Ward, who had already written 3 books. I said, let's do it. And Jonathan, he has been a wonderful co-author. It took us a year to write the book, and it came out a little over a year ago, and now it's in paperback. So I hope people read it, because it's very optimistic. And it has lessons learned. It's not just my memoirs, but it has lessons learned about dealing with conflict, dealing with mistakes, dealing with making decisions, and all those things I had to kind of overcome in my career.
I like that during COVID, some people took up knitting, and you wrote a book that's getting rave reviews. That's a little different.
I love knitting, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Knitting
So
is great.
Is that your next book on knitting? Maybe there you go.
Well, I'm probably not very qualified to do that, but writing that book was so hard, and I'm still trying to market it. I'm still out doing book signings, and I haven't really, my brain hasn't really engaged on that second book yet, but maybe it'll come out.
Well, I'd like to ask this of people that wrote their autobiography. Was it stressful to write it, or was it cathartic?
So it was probably a little of that, a little of everything. I thought that I could just do a lot of it by memory, but as I started writing the book, and I would write a chapter and I would send it to my co-author, Jonathan, and he would, kind of fix it up, fill in the blanks. He'd, hey, what about this? He'd ask me things that I hadn't thought about. But I had to go through old checklists. I had to go through my log books. Both Jonathan and I were calling people from, various parts of my life and asking them, anything interesting to put in the book? Do you remember this incident? What can you add to it? So it was actually a lot of work. I will say one thing, I'm very proud that everything in that book is accurate. We did not exaggerate.
Yeah.
I did not want any misleading, no lies, no exaggerations. Everything that I wrote really happened. And there's so much more, we had to edit a lot of it out because it only can be a certain length.
Oh, sure.
But that was going in. I said, no, everything must be true.
Well, good. Should people go to EileenCollins.com to purchase the book, or is Amazon a better place? Where's the best place to buy the book?
Well, Amazon is definitely, or Barnes & Noble is a better place. I was up there there's a Barnes & Noble that's in the area of Big Flats, Horseheads, in that area, and I was up there last summer. I must have signed over 100 books, and I left them there, so there might even still be some signed copies. And I'm happy to, whenever I come back, I'm going to try to set up a book signing at the Chemung County Historical Society. I don't know when that's going to happen, but because I've got, well, I won't go into all the details, but they are high on my list. I want to get that done. But I would say the best place is one of those websites, and I do have EileenCollins.com website, but that is more just information, and I think there's a link there also for the book.
Okay, so as soon as the show's over, you got to wait till after the show's over, then run to Barnes & Nobles and get maybe an autographed copy. I like it. Would you mind staying with us through the break?
Sure.
Okay, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program, and we're broadcasting from the Hesselson studio. Our guest, Eileen Collins, this is such a pleasure because, especially growing up in this area, Corning, Elmira, you're always talked about, right? You've always been a hero to all of us. You got the sign coming into town. What did it feel like when you first got home as an astronaut? How did that feel?
Well, I can answer that in two different ways.
Okay.
I can, coming home from space, my first day back, or coming home to the southern tier of New York. I can answer that in both levels. But coming back from my first mission in space, I was so overwhelmed. I thought, oh, wow, I finally did it. My dream finally came true. But I think I was so overwhelmed with readapting my body, readapting to Earth, and then jumping right into writing a report, doing debriefs, and going out, talking to the public. NASA sends us out for about a month, talking to, everybody from school children to legislators, and it was just a huge whirlwind. And when that was over, it's like, wow, what do I do now?
What do I do?
But then coming back to Elmira, New York, was, I love coming back and seeing my old friends and my family, and I've got a lot of letters from young people in the area, boys and girls, that were, writing papers for school and saying, I want to be an astronaut someday. So I think the fact of being a role model is, a lot of people shy away from being role models because, we all make mistakes and you don't want like that to happen. But I think that we're role models, actually, frankly, all of us, whether we like it or not, we're role models in what we do. And I think that was a responsibility that I tried to take on and take on with a lot of importance.
Well, and we mentioned at the beginning NASA's announcement about going to the moon. Do you ever look at those announcements and miss it? Miss being an astronaut?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Oh, yeah.
All the time. I would go back in a minute. And there's a little bit of jealousy in me that we got these 4 astronauts that are going, and how I would love to do that. Yeah. But I think about this really on a much higher level. Those 4 astronauts are representing us. Yeah. They are representing the human race. And when they go, we need to kind of think of ourselves as we're going with them. They're representing us. Now, that does put a lot of pressure on them, but I will say they are highly trained, and all 4 of them I know are extremely excited about going.
Oh, sure.
But then you come into that area where you got to push those emotions away, and you just have to focus and go knowing that you are representing your country and you're representing the human race.
Okay, so I find this interesting. You were an astronaut, a former flight instructor, and test pilot. Out of all 3 of those things, the test pilot sounds the most terrifying.
Well, I can tell you that the test pilot school was the hardest year of my life.
Is that right?
Without a doubt. I flew about 30 different types of aircraft that year. There was one of them that had only one seat, and you just go out and fly it without an instructor. And you had to write a report or make a speech or write a test plan for all of those. So it was a very, very hard year, and sleep was at a premium. It was important that you slept because I mean, you couldn't stay up late writing a paper because that could be a safety issue. You got to go fly the next day.
Right.
So it was, test piloting is very, very difficult. I'll say one more thing about that. As a pilot, you learn to fly safely when
Right.
you follow procedures. When you become a test pilot, you have to be more creative.
Yeah.
Because you're the one that determines how the airplane will be flown, how those systems will be operated, and you write the checklist. And now you've got the safety of other pilots as well as their passengers in your hands when you do flight test work.
Well, and this goes back to what we were talking about before, but your work ethic is, like you said, you don't give up on your ambitions. Always have that backup plan, like you said, but that's clearly a work ethic of a year of a very stressful job.
Well, I want to say along with that, having a high energy level is very,
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah.
I try to go to the gym as much as possible. I try to keep moving, as I say, you know, you got to keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that having a very healthy body and a healthy mind is so important to achieving your goals, which is why I talk to young people. You know, I tell them, you know, you got to keep your academics up there, you know,
Right.
you know, do your homework, you know, do what your teacher asks you to do, etc. But you've got to have a physical, keep your body physically in good shape, which includes don't do drugs,
Right.
don't drink too much. You've got to take care of yourself, and then also do some type of community work, and you know, whether it's church or sports or helping other people in your community, all those are very important.
That's great. We got to take one more short break, and then we'll be right back with Eileen Collins. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program. We're being joined by Eileen Collins. Again, I can't thank you enough for being on the show.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
When you look back at your career, what was maybe the most surreal moment because you had worked so hard to get to where you were?
Well, surreal, without a doubt, was after main engine cutoff on my first mission.
Yeah.
Now, the launch was totally overwhelming. I mean, I
sure.
will admit that. But if you're using the word surreal, it is when the main engine's cut off and you're going from 3G's acceleration to 0G,
Yeah.
and the lights are on, the dust is floating, my helmet ring is floating, my tethers on my checklist pages are floating, and I thought, wow, they weren't kidding about this zero gravity stuff.
Yeah.
And then the sun came up over the horizon, and I remember thinking, the Earth is round. Yes, the Earth is definitely round.
Yes.
And we go around it once every 90 minutes
Yeah.
in low Earth orbit. And that is, if that isn't surreal, I mean, that's of my life, that's by far the most surreal moment.
I'm sure. And when you mentioned liftoff, was there ever a point where you thought, what did I get myself into?
No, not really. I think the training, because we train in a motion-based simulator over and over
Yeah.
and over again, and we train with malfunctions. We're still like running checklists, throwing switches, making radio calls. We're very, very highly prepared. So the launch itself, the only thing we really could not simulate was the acceleration.
Okay.
You need a centrifuge to do that. But everything else was pretty well simulated, and I think that I was pretty well prepared. But man, you're being hurled into space, and you just kind of wonder, you know, you do kind of wonder after the fact, what did I get myself
Yeah.
into? But then it becomes, I think, something that you're just trained for.
Yes. Just before we go, I got one final question. We keep bringing up work ethic and all that, but what was it about Elmira specifically, growing up there, do you think that prepared you, and going to CCC, that prepared you for your future career?
But you know, I like to talk about small classrooms.
Yeah.
You know, I remember growing up, I had, you know, I know maybe there might have been 25 students in my class, but I remember that the teachers knew who we were,
Yeah.
and they knew us by name. The teachers were allowed to discipline. I mean, if we were chewing gum in class or talking out of turn, we had to stay after school and write on the blackboard, "I will not chew gum in class," 100 times
Yeah.
before we were allowed to go home. So I think the fact that they really cared about us, because when you're disciplined as a child, that means somebody cares about me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, you know, that was important. And I'm not sure if they really do that in schools today, but I think if you want to let the kids know that you care about them, you discipline them nicely.
Right, of course. But it's got to be really, again, and I mentioned before, but to be recognized by your hometown in this way, with the sign coming in, and obviously you're always get a hero's welcome when you come back to town. Do you have plans at any time to come back? Because if you do, I want you here in the studio, and we'll meet in person. How's that?
Well, first of all, let me
Yeah.
say, when it comes to the sign,
Yeah.
like when my picture is up
Yeah.
there, and I don't think that's me. I mean, that might like go to my head. I might think,
Okay.
oh, that's me, that's me. I think of it as it's the space program.
Oh, isn't that?
And I am a representative of the space program. And if I tried to put all that on me myself, I don't know if I would really be able to handle that without getting a big ego.
Sure.
And I don't want to get a big ego. For me, it's important to stay humble and to, the roots where I grew up in Elmira and Corning Community College. I want to maintain that level of humility that I had growing up, and I'm happy if I come back in town. I'm happy to talk with you.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Well, thank you so much for giving us all this time, and I recommend to everybody Through the Glass Ceiling to the Stars, the story of the first American woman to command a space mission. Thanks so much for being on.
All right, thank you.
All right, bye. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. There's our contact information. I received quite a few during the break. I'm glad you enjoyed the interview, both with Chris McPherson, the event director for Swim Across America, as well as, well, Myra Native, astronaut. What more could you ask for? Eileen Collins. Again, that new book, New Wish, it sounds like. Through the Glass Ceilings to the Stars. The story of the first American woman to command a space mission. Well, it was great to talk to her. There again is our contact information. Okay, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, and it's always tough to go from such neat interviews to the political side of things, but I mentioned at the very beginning this article from the New York Post. And what it's suggesting is really the holdup on the New York State budget isn't bail, which I think most of us thought it was, but I'm wondering what they're suggesting in the article is we're very close to a general agreement, is what Stuart Cousins said on bail talks. That worries me. This goes back to my theory that we're either, this is going to have even less teeth. I mean, it wasn't enough of a reform anyway from Governor Hochul. But is she either going to loosen even that, or is it going to be, I'll concede on another major issue? But right now, according to the governor, that, quote, I've laid out my priorities about how to make New York safer, more livable, and more affordable. Interesting word there, livable. I mean, I guess that's because of the housing, but that's a weird way of wording it. And that's the budget I plan to deliver. Before that, she had said, as I've said from the beginning, the right budget is more important than an on-time budget. Yeah, according to all indications, she doesn't really mind these extensions. How many extensions will there be? We should get a poll going, or like a Super Bowl pool. How many weeks will the extensions go? One other quick New York State issue, and then we have a couple of national stories, and really the ones that affect us as well. So don't think that when I say national, it's not something that affects your day-to-day life. But this is another New York State issue. Good government, various groups, saying that the New York budget's lack of transparency, Southern Week learned about, this wasn't even going to be the one I was going to talk about, but it works. Lack of transparency, which is clear. We have no idea what part of the process they're in. Like I said, shocked by that story in the New York Post that the housing is the top issue right now between the negotiators. The way that New York budgets play out, because they're in secret, is that things can get cooked up that no one knew was coming. Yes, like we saw when Governor Hochul proposed that change to our energy policy or our green initiatives that were instantly shot down. And they are not being adequately publicly vetted. No, as the resident of New York State, we have no idea what's going on. We have no idea what's really being said at the negotiation table. But by the time the public finds out, and this is a group called, well, everything's NYPIRG. Oh, there it is, New York Public Interest Research Group. By the time the public finds out, the train's already left the station. And that's the same every single time. Nothing's changed. This has been going on for decades and decades and decades. So transparency groups good government groups calling out the lack of transparency, and really what we find out days, weeks after something's been negotiated, we, the public, find out what we're going to be forced to deal with. Hence the reason why housing is now the top priority. One other quick New York issue. Here we go. I thought this was kind of fascinating. SUNY is dropping the SAT and ACT testing requirements for admission. And they give away a lot of the collegiate secrets here. Because why would they get rid of these standards, right? There's standardized test. Because enrollment declines. It's declined really since before COVID. So this is the dirty little secret that the standards, I guess, don't matter when it all boils down to loss of revenue. When the cash cows of students aren't coming and begging to get in. So four-year undergraduate colleges have seen enrollment declines. So let's get rid of the standards and let anybody in. Is that what they're suggesting? Again, I think that article gives away a lot of the issues that people have with college, with just the four-year education in general. We've talked about it in the past, and many people think about getting into a trade school. Think of the opportunities that open where you are getting out of your training, making money, where in this case, a lot of times students get out in major debt because we know these universities and colleges keep adding more and more costs because they know that they're going to get them, or at least they think they're going to get them. At some point, there's got to be a tipping point. So you got all this debt, and then you find out your degree in Renaissance art maybe doesn't translate as well to the working world. So there's been a lot of discussions in the news, a lot of discussions in general about are we seeing a shift from you have to have a college degree to, hey, maybe there's some really good avenues to make some really good money instead of leaving in debt that you may never even be able to repay, that kind of amount of debt. All right, let's take our last break, and then we'll wrap up on a couple other stories. And I've got a few things coming up on the weekend and on Monday that I want to highlight for you. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on beautiful Market Street in Corning. A good cause when Title 42 ends next month. Basically, what they're getting tired, the people at the border. They're getting tired of waiting. They're being duped by internet scams into thinking they'll be given asylum in the U.S. Well, we have intel that there's between 10,000 and 40,000 people waiting to cross over, a police official said. We know something is coming, and we're always preparing for what if a couple thousand of these people waiting there just get antsy, or they're like, today is the day. Again, going back to some of the things we've talked about in the past with the Biden administration, really signaling that this is an open, porous border. Oh my goodness, we're almost out of time. Also, without showing you the article itself, you undoubtedly by now saw that the Air National Guardsman was arrested in the intel leaks that we've been talking about all week. I don't know how to say his last name. Jack Teixeira, just 21 years old. And it's raised a lot of questions as to why someone barely old enough to drink or buy a pack of cigarettes is given so many national secrets. But from Douglas Murray from the New York Post, he said this should be no shock. This is a pattern. If you look back at it, do you ever hear, like he said, has there been a WikiLeaks from the Chinese Communist Party? Have we seen these caches of secrets from the Kremlin? No. It seems like every few years something like this happens with American intelligence, and it's making us a laughingstock. A lot of times the people that leak it, and it doesn't seem like with this young guy, but a lot of times it's so they can be a hero because there's this anti-American sentiment or this anti-war sentiment. But they're profoundly damaging, not just to giving away our secrets to our enemies, but also to relationships with allies. So he says, how can such a massive and damaging data leak have occurred? How can America be such an unreliable ally? In part because in recent years this has kept happening. Many Americans have not just become used to it, they actually look forward to it. It's a way to cheer on kind of this lack of patriotism that many people have. So to finish this piece up, he says, once again, the rest of the world knows everything about America. I just wish we knew how much they must be laughing at us right now. And that's the sad part. What this does for foreign relations, what this does just in general with our standing in the world. We talked about it earlier in the week, whether it's our horrible withdrawal from Afghanistan, whether it's the recent indictment of a former president with former President Trump. You know, the list can go on. This intelligence leak. What is someone like China, who we continue to talk about, and their threat, looking for a future where they're the world superpower? What does this signal to them? It's weakness after weakness after weakness. And in this case, with this document dump, or whatever you want to call it, this also hurts us, our standings with certain allies who, why would they tell us their secrets? Why would they give us information if we're just going to have some 21-year-old guy on I don't know what the website is. I know everybody keeps talking about it, but I'm not familiar with it. He leaks it on some chat, and the whole world now knows our secrets. But as they said, the New York Post, I guess, get used to it. It happens so frequently, it's not even shocking anymore. And I do like that the New York Post calls it geeky leaks. I don't know if you saw the guy. All right, so I promised you I'd mention a few things coming up over the weekend and on Monday. We brought this to you earlier. Don't forget the craft fair tomorrow from 10 to 2 p.m. Horseheads American Legion, post 442 at 71 Old Ithaca Road. And then our friends at Scope will be holding... Oh, is that not going to go? Oh, our friends at Scope are holding a meeting on Monday. I know that's a little ways away, but mark your calendar. Not a little ways, a couple days away. 7 p.m., Bath Rod and Gun Club. And Vicki Olin will be the special guest there. Vicki is the Steuben County, Board of Elections Commissioner. That does it for us today, folks. Have a great, fun weekend. We'll be back on Monday morning. I hope you are prepared, because we're going to have a fun week, a great week. I'm already looking forward to it. Let's forget the weekend. Let's get right back to it, but we'll see you on Monday. This has been Frankly Speaking.